So, in talking about the most common violations, reasons for the board to discipline a counselor, the most common was not having enough or keeping up to date on the continuing education and letting that kind of stuff lapse. The second was impairment, and that usually has to do with boundaries and dual relationships, things like that. The next one was like keeping proper records and documentation. The one after that was fraudulent billing, and then sex with a client, but that relates to the boundaries. So anyway, it was interesting to do some research on that and kind of come to a better understanding of what that looks like in the state, and what the board has to look at and make decisions about. So some of the themes that I noticed basically was crossing of boundaries when it comes to personal relationships, and also integrity in terms of honesty in billing, honesty in keeping records. If those two areas are ones that are well looked after, and you maintain the boundary with relationships with clients and family members, as well as honesty, then you're going to be doing well in terms of keeping your license and not experiencing discipline for those kinds of things. That's a good way to safeguard. So one of the more recent cases that I found was one where a counselor had gone outside of the agency recommendations in terms of where she was referring someone to. And the person that she referred to, she sent her to a shelter, paid for it herself rather than making arrangements and coordinating with other resources in the community to help accomplish that goal. So she was definitely crossing some personal boundaries there, professional boundaries. She did not keep accurate records and appropriate records, things like treatment plans and notes. She also recorded 2 sessions with clients where she had not received permission. And then after she left, she resigned shortly after a lot of this kind of stuff came up, and she ended up having non-counseling relationships with 2 clients. One was a male who she took shopping as well as out to eat at least 3 times. And the female client, she drove 50 miles, over 50 miles actually, to pick her up and take her to the dentist, and then she paid for the dental services that client received, or the former client. So in terms of different things that were violated with the ACA Code of Ethics, the first duty is the primary responsibility, and that is to the client to look after their welfare, and in terms of, as a professional counselor. And that was A1A. That was violated. A1B, records and documentation. Also A1C, counseling plans. A4A, avoiding harm. A6B, extending counseling boundaries. A6C, documenting boundary extensions. A6E, non-professional interactions or relationships other than sexual or romantic interactions or relationships. It's possible that they just didn't have documentation to say, yes, she did have a sexual relationship with that male client, but there wasn't documentation in the paperwork about that. So B6A, creating and maintaining records and documentation. B6C, permission to record. D1C, interdisciplinary teamwork. And then D1D, establishing professional and ethical obligations. She also violated the state's Licensed Professional Counselors Act in 3 different areas. So the overall outcome of the board's discipline was that she had to relinquish her license, promised not to reinstate her license anytime in the future. She also had to stop any activities that would meet the definition of counseling, the practice of counseling, and to physically turn in her license to the board. So as far as the ACA Code of Ethics and the state say about counselor impairment, there's an obligation that we have to monitor our own health, our own mental health, and make sure that we are exercising restraint and getting help if we need it, but also not provide professional services when we are impaired. If we see coworkers, whether they're supervisors or peers, that are showing signs of impairment, we have an obligation to talk with them and to intervene in some way, especially to protect the client, because that is our primary job. Thank you.